This is Michael Lavers with the Washington Blade. I'm here with Kimahli Powell. He is the executive director of Rainbow Railroad, based out of Toronto. So Kimahli, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to talk with you finally. So to start off, just tell us about Rainbow Railroad and the work that you and your colleagues do.
Absolutely. Thanks, Michael, for having me. So Rainbow Railroad is a international organization founded and based in Toronto, Canada, but also with an office and status in the United States, with the goal of helping LGBTQI plus persons facing persecution find safety. I'm sure you'll ask me in a follow-up question, but you know that around the world, and maybe your viewers are aware that around the world, unfortunately, there are still 70 countries that criminalize same-sex intimacy. And Rainbow Railroad stands alongside activists in many countries trying to promote human rights. And we long for a day where people can live their lives free of persecution in the countries that they live. But we also know that there are conditions that force people to flee. And so Rainbow Railroad exists to ultimately provide options for those facing imminent danger.
And the organization was founded in 2006, is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, we started as a grassroots collective. Really, I can't believe it now. It's been 15 years since Canada passed marriage equality, and 15 years since we, started to look internationally around what more work needs to be done. And that doesn't mean that work's not done in Canada and in the United States and other global north countries. We know very well in the United States that change can happen very quickly against human rights. But yeah, we started in 2006 with as a grassroots collective, and really within the past 5 years have become much more established and grown as an organization.
And I was going to quickly ask, how many folks has Rainbow Railroad helped over the last 15 years, if you could quantify that with a number?
Yeah, we've helped nearly 1,000 people.
Wow.
With direct movement. It's closer to 1,500 as we expand towards other types of in-country support as well.
And from which countries do these folks come? Is it a specific region, or is it just around the world where these folks tend to come from?
It's really around the world. Our work started in the Caribbean. I think that's where we've had the majority of our success, just based on historical knowledge of the region. But we've, because of the need, we've expanded to all regions. So, we've helped people from, off the top of my head, around 20 to 30 countries find safety.
And I know that Amin was one of the folks who was profiled fairly recently when you and your colleagues were in 60 Minutes. And I know he's from Chechnya, and we all know what's been going on in Chechnya with the anti-gay crackdown going on there. So can you give us an update on Amin and how he's doing?
Yeah, Amin is doing well. Really, what's remarkable about Amin and the situation in Chechnya is it's really hard to speak publicly about the situation there. And I think many people, if they heard about the story of Chechnya, they heard about it through your reporting or through international reporting. But it's really hard to speak out because of fear of retribution and fear of retribution for the families. And so, there's really two instances of people who spoke out publicly. One was featured in the film Welcome to Chechnya, which I recommend people view. It's a wonderful film by David France that profiles the work of our partners in the region. And Amin was the other one, at a great risk to him and his family. So he's doing well and resettled, and doesn't mean that the situation in Chechnya has stopped. It's ongoing, as is that kind of detention and entrapment of LGBTQI people in many countries.
And you mentioned earlier as we started, change can happen overnight. We're certainly dealing with that here in the US, as we all know, and we're still awaiting President Trump to concede the election results. Talk about just, again, based on the work that you and your colleagues do, how has the Trump administration's policy towards asylum seekers and immigrants and migrants affected the folks with whom you work? And I imagine there's been quite a significant impact. So talk about that if you could.
Yeah, absolutely. Rainbow Railroad, again, received 501c3 status in the United States in 2016, with the goal at the time of working with the Clinton administration on refugee policy and looking at pathways to safety for LGBTQI refugees in the United States. The top 5 countries by which we resettle folks are European countries like Germany, the Netherlands, Spain, and also Canada and the United States. And that came to a pretty abrupt halt after the election swung in Trump's favor. And of course, after the Muslim ban. And so we've been looking at his administration's policies in 2 different ways. One, I think it's not well noticed that the Muslim ban recall kind of expanded to other countries like Nigeria that criminalized same-sex intimacy. And so there was just real practical consequences around people who seek our help. And then you've got the situation at the US-Mexican border where there are thousands of LGBTQI migrants trying to get access to the United States. There's been some success, but not enough. And third, when we talk about detention, we usually think about children in cages, which of course is horrific and inhumane. But we've had people who sought asylum that we've helped enter the United States over the past few years who got arrested and detained for months before being released into the country. So the administration's policies, even though we're not a partisan organization, I think it's clear that the administration's approach to migrants and refugees put our work at risk. And so with the new administration becomes new opportunities to really pursue the intent of what we want to start when we expanded into the United States, which is making it easier for LGBTQI refugees to claim asylum in the United States, building the capacity of communities across the country to support refugees, because that's another big part of it, and ultimately help more people find safety.
How has, you're based in Canada, and again, I realize you work in the US as well, but have folks increasingly turned to Canada as an alternative refuge country as opposed to the US during the Trump administration? Is that something that you've been seeing over the last 4 years?
Yeah, Canada has always been a kind of leader in refugee resettlement. Our sponsorship program is unique to the world, which is now being adopted. So folks have always kind of used Canada as a country where they want to seek refuge. But the United States is always going to be a beacon of hope for many people. And so especially you saw that within the US-Mexican border, folks who can't just enter the country. We've been actively looking at alternative pathways like Canada or in Europe. And an odd thing that's happened, especially over the past year as the election was looming, was more folks who are born in the United States have been approaching us for requests for help, which is fascinating, a fascinating kind of data point around how LGBTQ rights are perceived right now in the United States.
Is that because they feel afraid to be in the US because of the Trump administration specifically?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think we've had a notable number of, we have just so you know, this might be a question you were going to ask, but we average about 3,000 requests a year now.
Wow.
And so we have, we need to have full-time capacity just to answer all the requests. And you can imagine my colleague who's a previous asylee seeker in Canada who triages every request, just how much work and energy that is to respond. But she always approaches us with unique data points because we now have a real interesting insight to LGBTQ persecution around the world. And she came to us with this observation of a spike of trans folks who from the United States claiming that credibly that they're in communities that are unsafe. Of course, that limits what we can do because our approach is to find destination countries that have LGBT human rights at the forefront of their work and acceptable living conditions. And so if the United States is not viewed as having either of those two things, we have a problem.
Yeah, and we're talking about this on the Transgender Day of Remembrance as well, and there's 38 reported transgender people murdered in this country so far this year. So the persecution is very real, and it seems as though some people are trying to escape that and looking to your organization for assistance in that. Yeah.
It also is part of our value. It's something that is really important to us and how we communicate this to the public and folks watching. That's very easy to demonize countries by which people are seeking asylum. I think it was really easy, for example, to demonize Ramzan Kadyrov and the Chechen government. We have to be really careful not to equate state sponsors of violence with people and countries. I use Jamaica as an example because that's I'm Canadian born, but I'm from the Jamaican diaspora, and that is it is possible for that country to be a paradise and a beautiful country, a culture, and be vehemently homophobic. And the challenge when we, as folks in Canada, the United States, and the global North, judge these countries is that we tend not to look inward about, there are lots of United States evangelicals who are actually perpetuating this homophobia in countries that criminalize same-sex intimacy. And we still have a lot of work to do in our own countries to ensure that folks like trans folks have rights and policies that protect human rights.
You mentioned earlier that you received roughly 3,000 calls for assistance each year, and I'm just wondering how many folks do you have on staff in total? Because that's a lot of calls to receive in 1 year. How many folks do you have total on staff?
Yeah, we've grown quite a bit. When I took over, we just, even though we've been around for 15 years, we've only been a charitable organization for 6, going on 7. And so when I became an executive director, it was just myself. And we are now, 15, which is a marked amount of growth. And we want to make sure that all of our resources go towards direct services for people. So we try to have enough capacity to do the work, understanding that 3,000 people is a lot, and make sure we have enough resources to provide direct support.
And I wanted to ask real quick, Kimahli, what motivated you personally to become involved in this work? Can you talk a little bit about what your personal motivation was to do this, or to become involved in this effort?
Yeah, I'll tell you. I'll expand on the story from Jamaica. I'll say that I've been engaged in human rights work for most of my career, and one of the things that I love about Rainbow Railroad is that prior to Rainbow Railroad, I worked for an HIV/AIDS policy organization, and one of the objectives of the organization is decriminalizing sodomy laws in Jamaica in particular.
Mhm.
And that the case that was launched in, I think 2013, 2014 is still ongoing. It's still in its infancy stage. And lots of activists are working on decriminalizing laws. And that takes a long time. It's crucial work. It's important work. Uh, and what I love about Rainbow Railroad specifically is that you can see the impact immediately.
Mhm.
When we when someone reaches out to us and we can provide a pathway to safety, some of the stories we hear on the other side are just incredible and heartwarming. And it's really tough, I want to say, to be a refugee, but it's really heartening to know that someone's safer. Personally, the motivation, and I'll use that the Jamaican story because my mother still travels to Jamaica every year, and she was there one year when we were actually trying to, with activists, put on a Jamaica Pride, which was a very hard undertaking. It was under strict security and clandestine, and not what you would think about Pride here. But we met at the same time, and I'm thankful to have parents that are family that is accepting of me. I think we don't give that much thought here anymore in the United States, in Canada, but it's not for granted that
Right.
family will be accepted.
Mhm.
And it dawned on her when I was telling her the stories of people facing persecution in Jamaica that was not for her decision to move to Canada. Uh, and just by my birthright here in Canada, my life trajectory is very different than if she would have just stayed there. And that privilege that we have as cisgendered gay men is immense. And I say that as a person of color. So I think that's my own motivation factor. I think that's why I'm so proud that so many people have galvanized towards our organization, our movement. Rainbow Railroad does not currently receive any government funding. So 100% of our operating budget is based on the international community rallying towards this work.
And that's a great way to end this, I think. I wanted to ask you about the 60 and 60 campaign that Rainbow Railroad has launched. Tell us about that and how can our readers support it?
Thanks for bringing that up. As I mentioned earlier, we receive 3,000 requests a year. It's been a remarkable year, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
Everyone has a COVID-related story, but when you're in the business, if you're a travel agent or you work in travel, you know what I'm about to say. If you're in the industry of moving people, COVID's been particularly challenging, right? And with borders closed, there was one point this year, Michael, where every single border was closed. Remarkable if you think about that for a second.
That's absolutely remarkable. Totally.
So it made our job really hard. If you think about sheltering in place and the resistance of sheltering in place, some of the countries that criminalize same-sex intimacy, not only were they most vulnerable to COVID, and still are, but they at one point had the most stringent lockdowns. So we witnessed a raid in Uganda where people were arrested under the guise of COVID protection, but they really just wanted to raid an LGBT shelter, and they were held for months. So we had to get creative. It was always our effort, because we help on average about 200 people a year. It was always our effort with 3,000 requests to try to find different ways of helping people. So providing more support in country, for example, moving one person from a more dangerous area within a country to a city center where they could be safe, as an example. And so we had to do more of that type of work during COVID. And with 60 and 60, the main objective of the campaign is that over the next 60 days, in November and December, we can help at least 60 of those people. And if we rally together the community, we can provide support to those people. And in particular right now, we have this unique opportunity because borders are loosening. We actually have identified a pathway where we can move physically 20 of those people right now if we raise the funds. So the 60/60 campaign is designed just to do that, to allow us to really help some of the people off the queue.
And you're hoping to raise $600,000 and with this campaign. And how much have you raised so far?
We're roughly a third of the way there, I believe. So we're about 3 weeks in, and we're about $200,000 in. So off to a good start. If we hit 300,000 by the end of the month, we're halfway there. And this is the time of giving. And so we know it's been a tough time during COVID, but our hope is that if you thankfully managed to get through the worst of the pandemic and are financially able, that you would support others who need support.
And is there a website that we can direct folks to? And if so, give us that information if you could.
Yeah, if you go to rainbowrailroad.org, you can learn more about our work and donate. Another thing you could do this year is create a fundraising page. Similar to a Facebook fundraiser, in lieu of gifts, you could ask folks to support their fundraising page, and then that will directly help people in need.
Very good. Well, Kimahli Powell, thank you so much for your time, and our best of luck to you and your colleagues on this. And let's definitely keep in touch moving forward.
Thanks so much, Michael, for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you so much.